Good afternoon and welcome to the Power from Port podcast. I'm your host, Jamie, and this afternoon I'll be reviewing Port Adelaide's clash against the GWS Giants in round 20 of season 2021. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so Port Adelaide 15-10-100 defeated GWS 11-7-73. The leading goal kickers on the night were Charlie Dixon with 4 goals 2, Peter Adams with 3 goals 1, Mitch Georgiades with 2 straight, and we had 6 single goal kickers. The major ball winners were Carl Amon with 31 disposals, 11 of those contested, 18 kicks, 13 handballs, and a huge 683 metres gained. Ollie Wines, 28 disposals, 14 of those contested, 14 kicks, 14 handballs, 385 metres gained. And Riley Bonner, 25 disposals, 5 contested, 18 kicks, 7 handballs, and 444 metres gained. So my initial thoughts post game, I was pretty proud of the group that we responded late. The first quarter was quite tight to begin with. I think there was only a couple of goals in it up until late in that first quarter. It was a bit of a battle in the middle quarters, but then when we needed to, we put the foot down and really put GWS to the sword in the last quarter, like a team looking to solidify that top 4 spot would. I mentioned in my preview that I think us going for 4th spot would spur us on more than GWS obviously playing for that 8th spot, and that showed with the class. I also noted that I thought we interchanged a couple of game styles throughout the game. We I mentioned in one of my previous episodes that for the most of the year we've been playing quite a defensive half game, and I had the thought that that might be because we are maybe trying to add another string to our bow, and because we are such a good team in the sense of a forward half game, that we were, for most of the early parts of the season, as a good team, knowing that we could get the job done, but practicing a different game plan so that we could go between the two when we needed. And I thought there was stages where we did kind of go back to that defensive half game, but then particularly in the first and last quarters, we utilised the forward half pressure, keep it inside 50 type of game. And I thought, again, we looked more imposing playing that forward half game. In those middle quarters, sure, GWS were going to come at us. That was always going to happen. But I thought we went into our shells a little bit and played that defensive half game a bit slower, a bit more safe, a little less dare, and ultimately a little less dynamic. And it gave room for GWS to really attack and put us under a bit of pressure. But the fact that we have confidence in game to change those styles and we can adapt, and led by Tom Jonas and the leadership group, obviously communicate that through the group. It's good to know that we can lean on a couple of different things, because it's been noted around the AFL and in the AFL media that particularly the top 3 teams, they all play slightly different game styles. So if we can adapt whoever we play against, that's again a really big plus, especially with us coming closer to a stronger team. The last thought I had initially post game was with 6 out of 6 at our home away from home, I guess it's called, of late, having to be in Melbourne and playing our games at Marvel Stadium. And that rounds out 7 total away wins for the season. Fans of the Mongrel Punt publication or internet publication would know the Road Warrior standings, where we're currently sitting at the top. Which basically, for those that don't know the Mongrel Punt, I'd go suggest checking it out. They do quite good reviews, especially of Port. Quite fans of Port, but they do something called the Road Warrior Ladder, where they rate teams and give teams points based on their away wins, and neutral venue wins, and things like that. And we're top, so 7 away wins. We're a good away team, and that bodes well for the last round when we play Western Bulldogs at Marvel, because we have all of a sudden a great record at Marvel. And there was quite a number of years there, I remember, that we had a terrible record at Marvel and its other monikers over time, but we had a pretty average record there. We couldn't win. It would seem that particularly the Melbourne teams would just get us playing fast football, and we struggled to adapt for whatever reason. And even more confusingly enough, in the past, that we played some fast styles, but then once we got to Marvel or Etihad or Telstra, as it was known in the past, we kind of played very flat-footed. So to be undefeated at Marvel, that bodes well, like I said, against the Western Bulldogs in the last round, which will be a pretty vital game if we're to finish in the top four, because Sydney, who are breathing down our neck, have a pretty good run in the last 3 games. So we're probably going to have to win that last game. But even if we don't and we go into the finals, we manage to hold on to the 4th spot. Again, we'll be playing away in that first week. I sense that the guys would still have a lot of confidence that they can win away. And if we do have to play away in that first final and win, it still means that we'll get the home final and a home preliminary, hopefully. So that it's good signs. We have dropped some at home, so it could work the other way around, where if we do get a home final, the away team would feel a little bit confident. But, I mean, mitigating factors throughout the year, and the fact that we're 6 out of 6 at Marvel particularly, but 7 total away, it fills me with a bit of confidence going into the last part of the season. So to break down our lines, our defence I thought were better than last week, albeit conceding more goals. They looked a bit tighter at times and looked a bit more impactful. They did get kind of caught out on the transition, but I felt that was more due to a lack of defensive pressure up the ground. I thought that Tom Jonas lifted his game from last couple of weeks. He was a lot more accountable, still using the ball well, coming out of the back half. Mackenzie and DBJ lifted. I thought DBJ in particular, his attack on the ball, especially early, was evident, where I've mentioned previously that he seems to be going at some contests half-hearted. I felt that he had a bit of a harder edge to him in this game. Being such a vital game, is probably playing in the minds there a little bit. And professional sport and sport generally, but professional sport in particular, it's such a mental game, being one dividing point between teams. So for those 3 to stand up, have a bit of more of an impact around the ground and surging forward. Our play of the day is shown on the Port Adelaide app, has the goal where we transitioned from the back 50 straight up to the forward 50. Zach Butters ended up getting the goal, but it started from a DBJ kick outside 50, defensive 50, which hit Travis Spoke on the wing. And, you know, it's that bit of dare that you look for to go along with him attacking contests hard. I mentioned that a couple of times now that if you were to give me 10, I would take that. GWS being a better quality side, they kicked 11. So again, it shows that we kind of got caught out at stages of the game. GWS probably being a better quality side than the couple that we've played in the last couple of rounds in Collingwood and St Kilda, and with a lot to play for. But I just prefer us just to tighten that up a little bit more and bring that down by at least a couple of goals. But us being a 14 to 15 goal team, like we were on Saturday, the 11 goals wasn't going to hurt us. And I'll take it still. Like I said, I'd like us to tighten up going forward. We allowed GWS 11 marks inside 50, which is probably, a lot more than you'd want, when I think we ended up with 10 in comparison. So, my best back for the game, I had Trent Mackenzie. I mentioned him in last week's game. He probably had a quieter game to his standards since coming back into the team. But I thought he lifted, having the 15 disposals, 6 of which were contested, 13 kicks and 2 handballs. using it at 87%, which is amazing, especially coming out of defensive 50 when we are under pressure. He does take a lot of kickouts, but if you're using it well like that, I mean, the cannon, you want it in his hands. He had 8 marks as well, 6 intercept possessions, and a huge 380 metres gained. So a nice all-round game from Trent McKenzie, and he just seems to be like he plays undersized against his opponents, and he's just very smart. You can tell he's got good footy smarts now. Being a grown man, as Ken mentioned actually last year, he just knows how to position himself to take those marks and impact when the ball's coming in with a bit of pressure. So great work from him lifting, and it just really makes it interesting because he came in for Cleary when Cleary got injured, and he hasn't really put a foot wrong. I'm not really sure what our best defensive six looks like, to be honest. I would like a informed Cleary in there, but when Trent McKenzie is playing this well, Tom Jonas being the captain and playing pretty well, you're probably not going to drop him. And Aliir playing his role, not playing great, but playing his role. It's just an interesting, and again, you don't want to be too tall. It is a marker that has been put on us, more so in the front half. But I'm just interested to see how they'll configure this team going forward. Hopefully we get some second tier football back and Cleary can build, because I mean he was, as most people have said, best on ground in the showdown, and he probably should have got the showdown medal for his contest up against Taylor Walker, who was up there in the Coleman, and he's still up there in the Coleman. I'm a huge fan of Cleary, but I'm also a huge fan of Trent McKenzie, who's doing quite well. I gave him a mulligan and he took it and bounced back well. My honourable mention goes to Ryan Burton. He had the 22 disposals. You probably could have argued that he was the better defender on the night. In my preview, I had him pointed to match up with Toby Green, and although I thought Ryan Burton held him well, especially in the first quarter and first half, I thought that Toby Green ended up getting on top of him and ending up with the 6 shots on goal. Probably let Burton down a little bit. I haven't had a chance to rewatch the game. I've just watched the highlights and the bits and pieces around there. But I'm not sure if Ryan Burton played on Green for the whole match. But I know some contests that I saw, like I said, Burton started well, but ended up conceding the 6 scoring shots. But I mean, to go along with that, I think Burton hurt him and hurt GWS on the other way around with us heading forward. He had the 22 disposals, 18 of those kicks, 9 marks, 5 tackles, 5 inside 50s and 3 rebound 50s for a huge 528 metres gained. So taking out the fact that Green had 6 shots on goal, those are some good stats. And I mentioned last week that he's got that attacking flair back in his game and obviously got a lot of confidence in his body. And now we're seeing a body of work from the likes of Burton, which, again, he has that X factor. When he's on, he just glides along the ground. And, I mean, imposing himself to 9 marks and 5 tackles, it means that he's really putting in the effort. And it's fantastic. He's one of our best players when he's up and going, and that's starting to show at the right time of the year. Moving into the midfield, they were challenged, as I expected in my preview. GWS's best line, I think, is their midfield, as I mentioned. Again, I pointed out Kelly and Hopper from the Giants, and they finished with 31 and 29 disposals, respectively. They challenged us, particularly in the second and third quarters, like we all, I think, realise. So I think it was just imperative that we hung in there. We kept trying to compete as well as we could have for the whole match and ended up wearing them down, because I feel that we had more depth, even though GWS do have a decent unit. I feel that our rotations through there could get on top, just as long as we kept at it and kept putting them under pressure. Some key statistics: centre clearances, we won 13-11, but stoppage clearances, they got it on top by one, beating us 17-16, so leaving the total ledger 29-28 in our favour. So we're up on clearances. The next key statistic, which seems to go along with that, is contested possessions, which we won 149-140. So as it's been for the whole year, I believe it is. Clearance in general and contested possessions. If we get on top in those, then we win the game. And again, we put a tick there. We won the hitouts 36-24, like I predicted in my preview. And I mean, it's not a outlandish prediction, but Mumford, he did try and bully us around. It's really his only go-to, and against lesser sides with more inexperienced ruckman, it tends to work, and he is imposing on the contest. But Scott Lycett he's no slouch. He's not skinny. He is a big brute of a man, and he is playing a bit on the edge with a bit of aggression this season. So, particularly against Lycett, I felt that Lycett absorbed that bullying nature of Mumford, didn't get drawn into a lot of the dirty tactics that he tried to employ. But as well as that, Lycett made him work around the ground, breaking away from a few contests and making him run. So I really feel that, again, having Laddams to help out helped to wear down Mumford, and it meant that Lycett could go harder when he was back in the rotation. So it's a potent combo, and we got on top in the hitouts. Another thing that I noticed, we playing that front half game, we won the inside 50, 65-46, and again, probably a bit wasteful, particularly in the first quarter. The commentary made it known we were dominant in that first quarter, really racking up that forward territory and those inside 50s, but we didn't quite take advantage of it, and I don't think we helped our forwards out as best as we could. But as well as that, I think GWS were flooding back a little bit in that first quarter. They tried to make it a defensive game to begin with. As I noted in my preview, they have been a bit more defensive in the last month or so of football. And there was a low amount of goals kicked first. But, I mean, we had 7 shots on goal. We probably should have converted more than 3 goals. And, yeah, I felt that our midfield probably could have helped our forwards out a bit more. But all in all, like I said, the class showed as the game wore on. Kelly and Hopper were, in the end, their only main contributors. Whitfield was another one. He came through there. But when you have the likes of Ward and Taranto in there as well, you probably would have expected more from them too, from a GWS point of view. But they fell out of the game. I don't think either of them made 20 possessions. I'd have to look again, but I don't think Taranto even made 15 possessions for the game, which is really poor on his end because he's had a good year. My best mid for the game, I don't know how you can go past Carl Amon. He was, clearly best on ground. He's been spoken about in high regard since yesterday's game, finishing with the 31 disposals, 11 of which were contested, 18 kicks, 13 handballs, 6 marks, 5 tackles, going at an amazing efficiency of 90%. So, I mean, if anyone's kicking at 90%, you put that in the book. Don't even worry about it. Don't think about it, especially with 31 disposals. Contributing 10 score involvements, 9 inside 50s, 19 pressure acts, 683 metres gained, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, and he had a goal to show for it as well. So just stats everywhere from Carl Amon to continue his great season, and a really imposing game from him, bursting out of the blocks with 11 disposals, 4 marks and 5 of those inside 50s in the first quarter. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to know or see how he prepares for the game or prepares for any game because that's amazing. And especially in such an important game, I'd love to be a fly on the wall because he seems a bit unassuming to me from an outside point of view. But to impose yourself like that on the game is amazing. And he has built, it's been spoken about again in regards to Karl Amon. Since getting rid of the likes of Polek and with, Matt White retiring in those years, there being a spot for Karl Amon to go into. He definitely impressed me when he solidified that spot with his use of the football and just his open field play. But this year in particular, he's added that harder edge and he can now play on the middle and then hurt you on the way out. I think I heard a statistic where he's averaging about 5 tackles over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So he can burn you in multiple ways. Again, X Factor. I talk about X Factor a lot because it's what's going to separate you from the better teams in those difficult, tight, contested matches in finals, particularly. So fantastic from him. Deserves all the plaudits he gets. And look, I mentioned in my Collingwood review that we don't expect him to get in the All Australian team, but if he keeps putting up numbers like that, I don't know how you could deny him at least an interchange spot. Like, I'm not expecting him to make it purely for the reasons why I mentioned before, that there's so many good inside midfielders. They always get the, rub of the green in terms of all Australian selections. So they'll shove him everywhere. They'll shove him on the wings. They'll shove him half forward. But yeah, you can't deny that impact. So yeah, look, hey, hopefully he makes the first 22. We'll wait and see. I want to give an honourable mention to Zach Butters. He spent his time equal in the forward half and the back half. He's now built a bit of form. I watched First Crack. They mentioned the 4 games back kind of rule. He finished with the 22 disposals, 11 and 11 in terms of kick and handballs, using it at 86%. It's just something that we've sorely missed is his creativity, but his efficiency to go along with that creativity. The 6 marks, the 7 score involvements, and he also finished with the 1 goal from that play I mentioned earlier. Much like the rest of the midfield, he built as the game wore on. He was a bit flat in the first quarter, but as the game wore on, he impacted more and more and more. It just evidently in his game is just that smart handballing and that use of the stand on the mark rule, where he's basically getting the mark, free kick, whatever it may be, and then just waiting for someone to run past. I think it was Michelangelo Rucci on the radio this morning that mentioned that, where particularly in the last quarter when we wanted to put the foot down, put GWS under some serious pressure. Yeah, he was he basically stands on his mark right next to the opposition player and just cheekily hands the ball over when knowing that the opposition player can't move, can't impact at all, or else it'll be a 50. So it's really smart by him. And then I can't go past that square up kick that I think it was Mitch Georgiadis that got on the end of it. Yes, that's right. Georgiadis, where Zach Butters is just in the pocket, and I swear he has eyes in the side of his head sometimes because he got it, and within a split second, he's just squared it up to Georgiadis, and that's what we've come to know and love with Zach Butters. Just that, again, X factor creativity that separates you from the opposition teams, and it makes it hard to. It makes it hard to defend against because, for all intents and purposes, you probably expect him to blaze away, probably at the top of the goal square or something like that, or maybe try and take the tackle and hand pass it off. But no, Zach Butters doesn't think like that, and he squared it up, and we got a goal out of it. So that's amazing. I had to give him an honourable mention for that. Moving on to the forward line, I thought that was our best line again. We had a good spread of goal kickers again, which I think going into this season, most people noted was probably going to be an effort for most oppositions to handle with all the dynamic players that we have in our forward spread, which is great because historically we've been a great defensive team, and our defensive line is kind of what we've relied on in seasons gone past, and for our forwards to be really building some momentum, getting some back from injury, some getting into form at the right time of the year. They were my best line again, and we're not relying too heavily on too few anymore, which is a great sign. Thinking back over the years, I'm not sure anyone would have thought we'd get to a point like that, but we're getting there, and it's amazing to see. Um, Started off, I mentioned this in the midfield breakdown, but the first quarter, we wasted some opportunities, kicking the 3 goals for. Some of the entries didn't help, but we kept at it. We built and built and built. Bit of a shootout in the second quarter in particular. Um, and then on our end, winning the fourth quarter quite handsomely. It was a night again for the Tools. They contributed 10 out of the 15 goals that we kicked. So again, splitting the defence right up, making them really accountable for a direct opposition as opposed to ganging up on one particular forward, a la Charlie Dixon. Having that spread, and I've mentioned before that not only are they good up in the air, contested marks, marking on the lead, but they're good on ground level most of the time too. So it's a real headache when, you know, defenders are having to worry about the contest up top, and then on the bottom to have our elite brigade of small forwards, but then our tall forwards also being nimble and versatile on ground level. It's imposing. It's really imposing, and uh, it's amazing signs because how do you structure up against that when they're all firing at once? It bodes really well going forward. Some oppositions are really going to have to do their homework. And there could be an unsung hero in an important match. We'll wait and see. I guess the other pleasing thing for me was the huge forward pressure. Again, first and last quarters, forward 50 game. We really locked it in there, and we brought our tackling pressure to go along with it. Comparatively, we had 19 tackles inside 50 to GWS's 8. So absolutely killed him in that aspect of the game, and that tackling pressure to go along with what I just said about being nimble when the ball hits the deck. It's a real struggle for teams to get it out, and that allows us repeat entries. Sure, we'd like to convert more of those entries, be a bit more efficient, but the fact that we're keeping it in there, we're getting looks at it. Personally, I think that's our best football. We're going to win more games than we lose, clearly. So the tackles inside 50 statistic is a telling one for me. My best forward on the night was Big Chuck Dixon. Again, having a great finish to the year, another bag of 4 goals and the 2 behinds to go along with it. 12 disposals, 9 of those contested, so another brutal game. Disappointing, I think, that, he didn't finish with all of his possessions contested again like he did last week, but I'll take, 9 out of 12. 5 marks and 4 of those being contested. So amazing work from him, and particularly early, he looked sore. I don't know if we should be worried about that, or I don't know. I mean, I don't think he would be putting it on or anything like that. But he was limping quite evidently in the first quarter in particular, and but I mean, when he's playing great games and kicking goals consistently throughout matches in this last month of football. So where do you go from there, especially with some vital games coming up? Like, we need to make statements against the Crows and Carlton in the next couple of rounds, gain some good percentages along with the 4 points, and then with that Western Bulldogs game. Potentially, I think we still will have the pre-finals bye, but, with COVID still lurking around, there is potential that we don't, and it's, do you rest him? Do you not? It's an interesting question to have, but I mentioned the contested marks. He's now number 1 for contested marks in the league, and I've talked about it in a previous episode where, he gets a lot of shit hung on him, but he always competes. He always ends up in the top 3 to 5 players in the league, and at the moment, he's number 1 for contested marks. So I mean, how can you argue with going to him a lot of the time when he's performing like that? His second half of the year has been amazing. He's now seventh in the Coleman with all the goals that he's kicked. And to look back earlier in the year, and it's quite interesting that Port Adelaide were getting a lot of criticism, but him in particular for not contributing to the scoreboard. However, in the earlier part of the year, we had an even spread of goal kickers. I think before Fantasia went out, our top four goal kickers were separated by 2 goals or 3 goals. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. By the looks of it, it's either we're targeting Charlie Dixon too much, or we're not. Or we've got an even spread and he's not contributing to the scoreboard like certain people would want him to. He can't win, but he's coming into some great form leading into finals, and with those numbers, you can't argue with it. To go along with number one contested marks and seventh in the Coleman, I just did a bit of maths earlier today, and out of like the top 10 goal kickers in the Coleman at the moment, he's sitting in the top three for kicking accuracy. Again, another criticism of Charlie Dixon in the past is his inaccurate set shot goal kicking, which in parts this year he's kind of missed some that he'd want to kick, some more straightforward shots. But when you compare that to the other top forwards, particularly in the top 10 for the Coleman race at the moment, it seems that everyone's kind of in that same bag. And I don't think he would have seen himself in the top three for conversion in years gone by. But he's there now. And, it was my gut feeling throughout this season, after he'd built a body of work, that he's actually kicking more than he's not. So in that regard, you could probably say that he's having an equal year to what he had last year. I think there are better key forwards, or other key forwards are performing at a better consistent level than they were last year. So there's a lot more competition for those key spots. But you judge a player based on their whole year, and he's kicking goals for fun at the moment, and in various ways as well. Marks, crumbs, from straight in front, from the pocket. So, yeah, like I said, you could argue that he's having as good a year as he is last year. He'll finish close to 50 goals the way he's going with the last 3 matches of the season. So that's a great return. And with Mitch Georgiadis knocking on the door of 30 goals, it's a great 1-2 combo we have. Moving on to my honourable mention. Look, I could have given this to a couple of players, but I've picked out Todd Marshall, and I've picked out Todd Marshall because he's actually. I mentioned in his wrap up last week that I've noticed that he's kind of been playing a bit of a Justin Westhoff role, and again, in this match, he split his time 50-50 in defensive half and offensive half. So it's kind of becoming more obvious, and it's not really a speculation that he is, and he looks capable at his best. He finished with the 1-goal, 16 disposals, 9 marks, which is amazing, 3 tackles, 5 score involvements, and a huge 362 metres gain when you consider that he is listed as a forward, but he is rotating all the way around the ground, and he is starting to not impose himself, but attack contests a bit harder and get involved with general play around the ground. Again, he's a smart user of the ball. He does some things that guys of his height probably wouldn't think of, but he just seems to see the game differently to other people, and he is impacting around the ground, and he's built a good few weeks of football. Let's be honest. He gets a lot of criticism, probably more so for the way he probably his body language, and again, so many similarities now that he is playing around the ground too, like Justin Westhoff, also had those same criticisms. He finished with a 1 goal, but he gave one directly off to Laddams, who probably I could have easily given the honourable mention to. Laddams had a great game, kicking the 3 goals. So it does, again, like the defence with Cleary, poses an interesting scenario because we've kind of structured up as a playing under the roof of Marvel. It's dry weather football, and finals are played in September, which the warmer weather starts to set in. Obviously, it can rain, but more often than not, you get a sunny game. And with the 4 tools, it's similar to West Coast back in their better years. If you can mark it, then the speed on the ground doesn't really matter. And it really poses an interesting scenario going forward with Laddams impacting on the scoreboard now, Todd Marshall being effective around the ground, and as well as that, contributing on the scoreboard, giving off, and being involved in general play. I don't know. Look, the comfortable route for me would be to drop one of them, stick with the 3 tools. But if it's not broke, don't fix it. And this was quite an important game coming up against a top 8 team when we played them. So again, depending on the narrative of the media, what criteria they want to stick to this week. Excuse me. Um, Toddy stepped up and Laddam stepped up. So I'm definitely glad I'm not in the selection committee because it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting going forward. All right, just had to save you from coughing a sneeze in the ear just then. But we'll move on to the hot and cold players for the round. So, starting with the hot player, for this segment, I kind of want to use it generally as a way to kind of highlight some players that are maybe going under the radar in both aspects. But my hot player for this round again is Karl Amon. He's the best on ground. He was my best mid, but he was my hot player last week. And if you've turned a hot player from last week to a best on ground performance, I can't go past him. Not much more has to be said about Karl. I've already given him quite the pump up. So Karl Amon, he's the hot player for this round again, and let's see what happens next week. The cold player for the round, I've got Sam Powell-Pepper. He finished with the 8 disposals, only 2 contested possessions, 5 kicks and 3 handballs, 4 marks, which is okay. Only the 1 tackle, which is very un-SPP-like. Where come to know him as a contested machine, and 1 tackle is a pretty ordinary return, 0 score involvements, and that 1 tackle wasn't even inside 50 where he is starting. So pretty disappointed from Sam. He is in a forward role, and you got to be careful with small forwards and half forward flankers because it is sometimes a bit of a graveyard in terms of your ability to impose yourself on the contest, on the game, on like just from a statistical point of view. There's a lot that you do as a small forward or a half forward flanker that can be unnoticed, much akin to a Motlop. He generally gets criticism because he hasn't, got 30 disposals as a small forward, which isn't their role. So I do list this cold player with some, that being in mind. But when we're kicking 15 goals, 10, and you've got upward of 60 inside 50s, that probably does give a player like SPP ample opportunity to impose himself. And yeah, to go along with, I felt that last week's game against Collingwood, not so quiet, not a amazing game in terms of breaking the game open, but there was some times against Collingwood where he just kind of ran through contests, which he can do, and just break it open, just cause some imbalance to the opposition and how they set up. But I didn't really see a lot of that, and it's concerning because, well, particularly when he was featuring more in the midfield over the last couple of seasons, I kind of throughout the year envision, that perfect kind of game on grand final day, pop up hypotheticals in my mind. And Sam Powell-Pepper in particular, in that midfield role, I have pictured him in the past being the type of player who could win a Norm Smith medal on his day because of that imposing bull out of the gate kind of battering ram role that he can play. And, his strength and dynamic ability. We all got quite familiar with that fend off earlier in his career, which has kind of gone away when players have wisened up to tackle it. But the return from SPP on the weekend is a little bit disappointing. He's gone a bit cold. And with the likes of Robbie Gray or Stephen Motlop to come back, he can find himself out of the team quite soon, which would be disappointing because I think most people would have him in their best 22 if he's at his best, which he probably isn't. So watch him with a keen eye next round to see what happens. But yeah. I also mentioned, I nearly forgot about, I mentioned in my preview that I pipped him to maybe play a defensive role on Lockie Whitfield. I'm not sure if he did get pegged in a defensive role against one of the GWS backmen. That can contribute to a low return in terms of disposal, but when Lockie Whitfield got, I think, 28 possessions himself, it probably says that either he was and he didn't perform that role well, or B, he wasn't and he didn't impose himself on the game well. So that's just my last point on SPP. Again, we hope for the best, but it's getting to the business end of the year and we need a 22 that is going to contribute well throughout a whole game. So finishing up my best on ground with the 3 votes for Carl Amon, 2 votes for Charlie Dixon, and 1 vote for Ollie Wines. I haven't really been able to talk about Ollie Wines much in my wrap-up, but again, played a true Ollie Wines game. It'll be interesting to see if he gets votes on Brownlow night. Particularly when the game was there to be won, he stood up, he imposed himself. I mentioned that he's got just that big body, which the GWS midfielders lack. And I think it was in the first quarter, along with Carl Amon, imposed himself to great effect using that big body. He's in my votes. Kind of flew under the radar a little bit, just with some highlights around the ground. But true Ollie Wines game, and I gave him the 1 vote. All right, so my final thoughts for the game. I've written in my notes here, hat trick for Bonner. I pointed out an interesting note in my preview about looking back to that 2019 clash against the Giants at Adelaide Oval, and Bonner being one of our better players in that game. And also coming off the back of 2 rounds of great games from Bonner, against St Kilda and Collingwood, I felt that he backed that up handsomely. He finished with the 25 disposals, 18 kicks, 7 handballs, using it at 76% efficiency, which is perfect. A little lower than the last 2 weeks, but with the last 2 weeks being at 83, you can forgive someone for dropping just that little bit to 76%, which is still a great efficiency in regards to average use of the football across the league. 5 marks, 7 intercept possessions, 8 rebound 50s, 2 inside 50s. So that's just another good all-round game for Bonner. So that's 3 in a row, giving him the hat trick for 3 games in a row. With 3 games left, let's hope for 6. Because we've now seen Bonner at his best is using the ball well, getting the ball around the ground, and imposing himself on the game. We can't ask for any more. And the more often he does that, the less criticism he's going to get. And just shows that he can be a vital cog in our team. Just a silky smooth mover when he's on and glides around the ground. So happy for Riley Bonner. Let's hope that he continues it on. My next note is the 301 up for Boki. A job that's been so much spoken about Travis Boki over the last couple of weeks, and for good reason. Two milestones in 2 weeks. Couldn't happen to a better bloke. I've spoken at length about my thoughts on Boki and my happiness for him. So now he's the record games holder in the AFL. He's just going to break his own record from now until he retires. So that's amazing. And again, we got the win in his milestone game. I'm sure now from this point on, for the rest of the season, he's going to enjoy of just coming back into the pack in terms of the limelight and just being able to focus purely on the games at hand and not on his milestones and whatnot. But happy for him again. Super great member of our football club and will go down as one of the best. Just an interesting note. Obviously, this year is COVID affected, which means that crowds can't go to games, particularly in Melbourne, where we've set up our home away from home. Just obviously, we love that ambiance, the mumble of the crowd being there, and then the agony and the ecstasy riding the wave of the game, and the crowd cheering or Bronx cheers. We love that. It creates a great atmosphere, and we know it better than anyone in the league. Being Port supporters, Port games are great for their crowd atmosphere. But it's kind of weird, but I'm kind of enjoying the sounds of the game in a closed Marvel Stadium with no crowds. Like, just something about hearing them actually kick the ball, and when they kick the ball well, just hearing that pump. Just that thud off the boot. I don't know. I'm just finding the joy in it. Because, I mean, you can tell a good kick from one another. It's kind of weird, but I'm enjoying that. But as well as that is, I'm enjoying the enthusiasm that you can hear from the players, particularly when a goal's been kicked. And I've noticed Zach Butters is a big one for this, just cheering, getting into it, making it known to the opposition that we've just kicked a goal, getting the yeah boy or come on kind of going and hearing that through the feed. And I think he was on radio last week and saying that not that we can hear it at home, but as players in Marvel Stadium, they can sometimes hear the commentary team commentating the big moments. And I don't know if people are aware, but commentary teams generally sit with an open window. So you can imagine that they're the only crowd there and echoing through a closed roof at Marvel Stadium. Yeah, I'm just... it's a bit of an alternative opinion, but I'm kind of enjoying the sounds. Don't get me wrong, I'd much prefer crowds being there for that that typical atmosphere that you get, especially in a game like the game we had yesterday, a big game, top 8 clash. But yeah, kind of enjoying those alternate sounds as well. So where to from here? We got 3 games left, 2 very winnable, and then 1 50-50. I think we can go the 2-1 and still finish 4th. But we'd need to win the 2 by some handsome margins because, like I said, Sydney have got a good run home. They can win the last 3 games and be equal on points if we do drop one of our last 3 games. But I've got us pegged to win the 2, and I think we'll do quite well against Western Bulldogs, learning a lot from our clash at Adelaide Oval earlier in the season. And with that being said, if we do finish in the top 4, it's our best effort since 2004 in regards to backing up a top 4 finish in consecutive seasons. So I mentioned maybe in my last episode or maybe the one before that, but I've been a member since 2008, and it's the first time where the Power have been a good team for more than 1 year in a row. And if we finish top 4, it's just going to consolidate that view. And again, I was going to say silence the Ken haters, but they're not going to be happy until he wins a premiership. But it just shows that we're being coached quite well. We've got a good team. And my prediction from this point is that we'll finish top 4. We'll probably finish in 4th spot, which means we'll have to play away the first week. But I don't care, to be honest. I think we're good enough. And by that point, we should have our strongest team out in the park. So it's anywhere, anytime for me. That's my kind of prediction. Just lastly, for those who are listening to my preview, I'm going to trial in my previews a best bet for people who are that way inclined. I tipped the line, which was minus 12.5 points for Port Adelaide. Getting up by 27 points means that we cleared that line twice over and then some. So for anyone who got on board there, as well as myself, that one got up. So I'll have a look at the next game and give one out again in the preview for the showdown. So that's all from me. For those that have tuned in, listened to me on various platforms, thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. Again, if you could chuck me a like on Facebook, join in the conversation. I'm posting most of the week, sharing some thoughts and opinions on some various news and articles that come out. So yeah, love to get other people involved in some port talk. It's what I crave, especially this time of the year. If you are listening to this podcast on any of the main providers, I'd really appreciate a rate and review. It would help me out thoroughly, fill me with a bit of confidence, a bit of validation, which we all crave. And yeah, I'd really appreciate it. I want to build this podcast up. Obviously, starting at the back end of the year isn't ideal, but hey, it's funny when inspiration strikes, and I plan on doing it consistently from this point on. So, yeah, chuck me a like on Facebook, rate and review on Apple or Google, wherever you're listening, and tune in later in the week for the preview for the showdown. But that's all from me, and bye for now.